The curse of the spirals is destroying the town and taking people's minds with it. The chaos reaches a fever pitch. Welcome to the world of Uzumaki Spiral into Horror. This is episode 4, the final episode. So yeah, this is the finale. No more episodes after this. So I will say that this episode's better than the previous two, but does it actually stick the landing? Because saying it's better than the previous two isn't saying much, because the previous two weren't all that great, especially the last episode. The last episode's pretty terrible. So does episode 4 end up sticking the landing? Well, keep watching this video and I'll answer that question for you. So this episode covers 6 chapters from the manga. It covers chapter 14, Butterflies, chapter 15, Chaos, chapter 16, Erosion, chapter 17, Escape, chapter 18, The Labyrinth, and chapter 19, Completion. So we start off this episode with a team of reporters on their way to Kurouzu-cho. So basically they've been hearing weird things going on and they're trying to go investigate. One of them is a woman named Kirie, and they are just riding into the town when all of a sudden one of the men realizes that there's a twister appearing behind them. It just appears out of nowhere, hits their car, flips it over, and everybody but Kirie dies. So she huffs it on foot into the town, and along the way she's noticing that every time she breathes, her breath seems to be turning into spirals. And then as she arrives in the town, she discovers that it's basically all destroyed. All the buildings are destroyed. There's just nothing but rubble and debris and dead bodies everywhere. Of course, she's kind of freaking out. She ends up noticing a helicopter flying overhead, and a twister forms just to take it down. So twisters are just popping up all over the place in this town. She also ends up seeing the dragonfly pond, and the dragonfly pond is now nothing but a giant whirlpool. So it too has become nothing but a giant spiral. And eventually she comes across Kirie and her brother Mitsuo, and the two of them basically tell her, hey, you gotta be quiet. And they notice people riding in tornadoes, and this is called the Butterfly Gang. This is the part that just kind of took me out. It is in the actual manga, so I can't blame the anime. I did find this chapter to be kind of weak when it came to the manga, just because of how like over the top stupid it was. But basically there were people that are able to ride the tornadoes. So Kirie basically explains that you have to talk quiet and you have to walk slow, because any noise you make, if it's like a loud noise or if you walk fast, you will create tornadoes. Basically the wind will blow out from you and create spirals. And there are some people who are able to use this to create tornadoes that they can ride. And so basically they're riding tornadoes and just causing havoc and chaos and stuff. I don't know. To me, I just think it's kind of dumb. It would be like an interesting one shot if it was its own thing, because Junji Ito doesn't do just straight up horror. I mean, other than his like slice of life cat comedy manga series that he does, most of his horror stuff can either be very body horror, eldritch horror, just disturbing. Some of them can even just be like dark comedy. This feels like it could be one of those, like just a random chapter that he can have in one of his anthologies or something. I feel like Uzumaki, while there are moments that can kind of maybe slightly fall into the dark comedy, it never delves too much into that. It's mostly just a straight up horror. So to have this chapter in there, especially when we're like nearing the end, it just kind of feels like it's destroying the horror aspect. I mean, you have this reporter coming to town, her roommates just die, she sees another helicopter explode, the town's completely destroyed. Now all of a sudden there's people riding tornadoes and having fun and causing chaos. It's like, okay. Yeah, I didn't care too much for this, but I completely understand having to adapt it because it is in the manga. It's just, in my opinion, one of the weakest parts of the manga. With that said, Kirie is basically taking Chie to a row house. It's the house that they were in the last episode. Basically in there it's kind of safe, and so she leads Chie there, and they open up the row house, and there's a bunch of people inside. Like, it's packed full, and they're complaining that, you know, Kirie can't come in because there's no more space. And of course Kirie gets upset because she's like, hey, this is like my row house. Me and my parents got this place. We were the first ones here. We're letting you guys in. I should be able to get inside. That's when she noticed Shuuichi in the corner. Shuichi has kind of lost his mind at this point. Like, he's still there, but he's pretty much like just super nihilistic. He's like, you know, the curse has pretty much almost completed. There's no escape from this town. We're lost. We're done. And there's this guy who is very upset with hearing that. So he kicks Shuichi out. And of course, Kirie goes with Shuichi, Chie follows, and then Kirie's mom and dad go with her. So we basically have Kirie, her family, Chie, and Shuichi walking through the destroyed town. And the dad's basically just saying about how he doesn't want to leave the town. He just wants to go back to making pottery. He just wants to complete his mastery of the spiral, like his great art. And of course his wife's like, what's wrong with you? Like, the pond is nothing but a giant whirlpool. There's no way you can collect clay from it anymore. Like, we have to get out of here. And that's when they notice a snail person. And basically there's more snail people now than just Katayama and the teacher and the bully. A lot of people have been turning into snails. And they smell something that smells pretty good. So they basically climb up some wreckage and they see part of the gang is cooking the snail people. So they're eating snail people. And of course Kirie is like disgusted because it's like, these were once people. The gang ends up noticing them and asks if they want to eat some of the snail. Basically says it's escargot. And Kirie is like, they're not escargot. They used to be human beings like us. And they're like, they're not humans anymore. They seem to notice Kirie and Chie, and of course they find them beautiful, and they want them for themselves. Thankfully, it doesn't get too bad. Basically, it's just kind of like the threat of, hey, girls, why don't you stay with us? We'll protect you. Let's have some fun, that kind of thing. Kirie's dad goes to help her when one of the gang ends up basically blowing him away. He like kind of blows his breath, which creates a tornado, and picks up Kirie's dad and sends him flying somewhere. And then the more of them like create tornadoes in the air, and then the rest of them join. And that's when Kirie and the rest of her group try to make an escape for it. And of course, as they're running and stuff, a tornado picks them up. And Kirie and Chie are flying through the tornado. They end up grabbing hands, and Kirie points towards the dragonfly pond and says, hey, the tornado is pulling us into that direction. It's pulling us into the pond. It looks like they might get sucked in, but all of a sudden, someone grabs Kirie's hand, and it's Shuichi. Shuichi has climbed up a telephone pole, and he's grabbed her hand, and so he's able to stomp Kirie and Chie from being pulled into the pond. Meanwhile, the rest of the gang, the tornado gang, they basically are flying towards Kirie because they want to grab Kirie and Chie because they're not done with the two girls yet. They want them. They want the girls for themselves. But they blow past Kirie and Chie, and they start to try to use the tornadoes to come back and grab Chie and Kirie, but then they end up getting pulled into the pond. And so the gang is no more. They get sucked into the pond. And then eventually the tornado dies down and everyone's fine. Everyone's safe, except for Kirie's dad, who has gone missing, and Kirie's mom, who has injured herself from the tornado. So then they go down and they meet a new group of people. And the group is being led by this man named Tanizaki. Tanizaki basically explains that him and the group are like volunteers. They came to this town, all these weird things started happening, and they were trying to make an escape through the tunnel, but the tunnel just kept spiraling and spiraling and spiraling to the point where it got so bad that they almost slid down into the darkness below. So then they realized, okay, well, we can't leave out through the tunnel. So then he explains about how they came up with an idea of using some of the wreckage to create a raft and then go out through the sea. But just as they were doing that, they saw another group had the same idea, and that group created their own raft, and they went out into the sea. And all of a sudden, a whirlpool just appeared out of nowhere and sucked them in and killed them. So then they realized, well, damn, we can't go out through the tunnel that we came in from. And we can't leave through the sea. I think we're trapped here. There's like no other way we can get out. Now they're like, okay, so like, what do we do now? And that's when Kirie leads them back to this small little shelter. It's basically just a collapsed roof. That's where her and her mom and her brother have been hanging out for the meanwhile. Because Kirie's mom is injured. She tells her mom, I haven't been able to find dad yet. We're going to try to make our way to the row house. Basically, there's a row house that might give us better protection from the tornadoes. Let's try to make our way back there. And the rest of the group joins with them. And along the way, they find another snail person. And then they basically theorize that the reason why so many snail people are being created is because the fact that they're walking so slow. Because they have to walk slow Otherwise, they're going to kick up tornadoes. But because they're walking so slow, that's how they start mutating into snails. And we even have one of the group members, turns out that he's starting to become a snail person. Like he's starting to develop the spiral. And so they believe, well, if we can get into shelter, if we can get into the row house, maybe the curse will disappear. Maybe the curse is only cursing us because we're outside and we're walking. But if we stay inside someplace safe, the curse will go away. I don't think Kirie really buys this too much, but that's the only hope that this guy has. So they make their way back to the row house. And along the way, they basically the people inside are telling them to leave, that you're not allowed to come in. There's too many people in here and there's not enough space. But the guy is desperate. He wants to get in because he doesn't want to turn into a snail person. So he rushes towards the door and he opens it, and 3 kids poke their heads out, blow at him, and basically send him flying. But this isn't going to deter him. So he tries to blow back and it doesn't do anything. So him and some men pick up a giant piece of debris and they're going to use this as a battering ram. So they run and they bash into the door, only to realize that all the people inside have twisted together into one being. Basically, if anyone's familiar with the whole like rat king theory, where if you have a group of rats, then eventually their tails will all get entangled together and they basically have to move as one being. That's kind of what happened here. The people were stuffed inside and overlapping each other for so long that they've now like morphed into this weird conglomerate of all these beings and limbs. Yeah, they're just nothing but like a mass of limbs and flesh and stuff. And eventually there's so many people that the sides of the row house, the walls collapse and people just start like tumbling out, or like parts of the limbs start tumbling out. And then they immediately start grabbing the debris nearby and start rebuilding walls. So basically they're trying to cover their exposed bodies with a loose scrap of wood. And so they just keep building around themselves so that they can be inside shelter. And that's when Kirie and her group realize, well, we can't be here. Like we can't go inside. So let's just walk around and see what else we can do. Maybe there's some other places we can go for shelter. And as they're out walking, they see some Japanese battleships. Basically, some of the Navy has come to help out the town. But then a giant whirlpool just shows up right under them and sucks them in, and they're all gone. I kind of liked the fact that now we're kind of showing why the people can't leave. Because now whenever they try to leave, like tornadoes will kick up, whirlpools will show up, the tunnel will turn into a spiral and send them sliding back into town. Like there's no way out. I kind of wish that maybe we had something like this earlier. This is like a problem that I had with the Uzumaki manga. I've talked about this ad nauseum in previous videos, but I always felt like Uzumaki would have worked better as an anthology, or each chapter was a different character within this town, because most of the story has like a beginning, middle, end. It doesn't really flow together. Like the first 2 chapters flow together, and these last 6 chapters actually flow well together, which is why I think this episode so far is like a lot better pace than the previous one. It's not just random bits and pieces from different chapters shoved together. It's basically like the last few chapters of Uzumaki, like one chapter flowed into the next, flowed into the next. The beginning of one chapter takes place immediately after the end of the previous chapter. Whereas before, we didn't have that. We had like time passing and stuff without really even realizing. And I always thought that was a problem because Shuuichi from the very beginning, like the very first time we see him, he's like, hey, have you ever thought about running away together, leaving this town? And it always bugged me how passive Kirie was, where she starts noticing all these things, and not once does she ever think about leaving. And by the time they decide to leave, that's when it's already too late. But by then, it's like so much weird shit has already happened to you. Why did you stay in this town for so long? Like that always bugged the hell out of me. Don't get me wrong, I love Uzumaki. I think it's a fantastic manga. But that is a nitpick I have in the manga that just, it really bugged me. And the anime only exasperated it because in the manga, you'll have one event happening per chapter. But in the anime, because the episode is covering multiple chapters and it's covering them like bits and pieces here and there, we just have multiple things happening at once. In the last episode, like when I was watching it live, I started laughing my ass off when the Jack in the Box showed up. Because it's like, we literally just had Kirie getting attacked by some weird pervert dude, only to have him get murdered right in front of her. And then before she can even get up, this zombie boy shows up and starts trying to attack her. It's just, it seems completely out of nowhere. It's just really random. In the manga, it makes way more sense because it doesn't happen that way. the Jack-in-the-Box has its own chapter. It doesn't continue right after another chapter. The anime just really exasperated that problem. But yeah, that's something that I just kind of wish that we had, where we had something. It could even be something as simple as after what happened with Shuichi's dad and mom, Shuichi decides, hey, let's get the hell out of here. And Kirie is like, yes, let's go. And so they try to make their way out of town. And as they pass the town limits, maybe something happens and they wake up back in the town again with no memory of trying to escape. And so basically that would explain why. Like, you only need to show it once. And then after that, after every event, maybe you start the next chapter with, or you can even end the chapter with Kirie waking up in bed. And so we, the audience, know that whenever they try to leave the town, something happens, they wake up back in their bed with no memory of them leaving the town or trying to leave the town. So basically, they can't escape. The town has trapped them. You just got to show that to us once, and then from then on, anytime weird stuff happens, it all makes sense why these people aren't leaving. It's because they can. They physically can. Every time they try to leave, they wake up back in their rooms with no memory of trying to escape, and then they just start the day all over again, and a new crazy event happens. But because that we don't get any explanation, like there's nothing stopping them from leaving the town until this point. So it just bugs the hell out of me why no one ever tried to leave the town until now, until it was already too late. But back to what I was saying. So yeah, there's no way for anyone to leave the town. The group starts walking, they end up getting hungry, and they discover the body of one of the snail people, or a caffeine. Basically, it's left over from the butterfly gang. Tanizaki and his group decide to start eating the snail. Kirie is very much against it. And then she turns to look at Shuichi and she sees Shuichi eating the snail. And so she figures, well, he's eating the snail, then I guess I'll eat the snail. And so yeah, they're now eating snail people. Unfortunately for Kirie, she discovers that her brother Mitsuha is starting to turn into a snail person. He has the spiral on his back and he's starting to grow the hump. Basically the shell is starting to protrude. She's like, okay, I got to get him out of here. Maybe if I can get him out of the town, the curse will lift and he'll be fine. We can't leave out through the tunnel. We can't leave out through the sea, but maybe we can leave out through the mountains. So she grabs a stick. She basically holds it up and she's like, wherever the stick drops, that's the direction that we're going to head in, like wherever it points to. And so she does that and they start walking up the path towards the mountains, trying to leave the town. And along the way, they see Tanizaki. Tanizaki is basically building a row house. And they're wondering, like, what the hell is he doing? He notices them, and he starts yelling at them that he's creating a row house, that they should come back. By the time they come back to him, he'll have the row house completed, and they'll be safe. They'll have shelter. And of course, him yelling causes another tornado to shoot out at the gang, but they're able to duck down, and they're fine. And so they walk through the forest. And as they're walking down the path, they realize that this is weird. It's strange. Like, not only are all the plants and trees spirals and stuff, but we should have reached the road ages ago. The path isn't this long. And then up ahead, they see figures approaching. And it turns out to be the rest of Tanizaki's group. So Tanizaki had stayed behind to create the row house. The rest of the group has approached Kirie on this road. And she explains, like, what are you guys doing? Where are you going? Why are you walking in the opposite direction of the exit, of the way out? And they explain, what are you talking about? Like, where are you going? We saw you and your group leaving and we decided to follow after you. How'd you get ahead of us? Why are you walking back? So basically they realize, oh crap, they've been spiraling. They're just walking in circles. And they decide, okay, well, we just got to keep pushing on ahead. And so they push on ahead when one of them turns into a snail person. And the rest of the group gets very excited when they see this. They're basically really happy, like, oh man, this is another snail person. The snail people are delicious. Let's eat this guy. Even though he was their friend, they're going to eat him. And so they go to eat him, but he dips back into his shell. And they're like, oh, well, we're just going to eat him raw. We're going to see how this tastes. And so one of them climbs into the shell to start eating away at his snail friend. And the rest of the group start hovering around. They're like, hey, don't eat them all. Like, we want some of it too. And that's when Kirie is like, get the hell out of here. Because my brother is turning into a snail person. If they see this, they're going to try to eat him as well. So they start making their way away from the group as the group starts eating their snail friend. And as they're walking, Chie looks at her watch, and her watch is all spiraled. So now she has no idea how much time has passed, and they feel like they've been walking for hours. And then they see figures up ahead, and it turns out to be the group again. Somehow they've spiraled into connecting once again. And the group is like, are you trying to escape from us? Are you trying to run away from us? Why won't you let us join you? And then they notice Mitsuo, and they're like, hey, what's wrong with him? Why is his back so big? Is he turning into a snail person? And they start licking their lips. And Kirie and her group basically say, no, he's wearing a backpack, and Shuichi's going to try to like carry him. But eventually, after they take a few steps, Mitsuro just like completely turns into a snail person. And of course, the group sees it, and they want to eat Mitsuo. But of course, Kirie doesn't want this group to eat her brother. So Shuichi grabs Mitsuro, they run off the path, and they come across the cliffside. And Kirie is basically begging Mitsuro to go down the cliffside. Basically, we can't carry you with us because we'll be too slow. If you go down the cliffside, these men won't be able to follow after you because the cliffside's too steep. And go, and I promise that I'll come back for you once I can. So Mitsuro goes down the cliffside, and that's the last we see of him. He's now a snail person. Kirie, Shuichi, and Chie continue down the path. They see the group show up again. They're wondering where the snail person is. They're like, they give him to us. We want to eat him. And then all of a sudden they turn into these weird spirals, and they just kind of collapse on the floor. And Shuichi and Kirie and Chie look at them for a while, and then they continue walking through the town. Basically, Shuichi's like, the curse has got them now. Let's go back to the town for now. Like, we're just walking in circles. Maybe there's something in the town we can use to help us. But as they make their way to the town, they realize that the row house, it's expanded. Basically, the entire town now is just nothing but a giant spiral of row houses. And they're like, how long have we been gone for? There's no way that this much should have been built. It doesn't seem like we've been gone for like maybe an hour or so. But now the entire town has been like rebuilt again into a giant spiral. How did this happen? And they basically theorize that time has spiraled out of chaos. It's no longer normal, and time is passing differently depending on where you're at. So maybe the town itself, years have passed, whereas us outside of the town, like we're still in the town, but we're on the outskirts. The time there has slowed down. Basically, Shuichi theorizes that maybe this was the town in its original form. That maybe the town was originally nothing but a giant spiral of houses. And then eventually, like, parts of it got destroyed and stuff. And then we saw the town that we saw in the beginning of the series. And now the town's being rebuilt to what it once was. Back into its original form, which is a giant spiral with the dragonfly pond in the middle of the spiral. And so they decide, well, let's walk through the row houses. Let's go through the labyrinth of the houses. Let's try to get to the dragonfly pond. Maybe that's where my dad is, because Kirie hasn't given up on her parents. She wants to find where her parents are at. Along the way, she finds just dead bodies of people all spiraled up. And then eventually she comes across Tanizaki. But Tanizaki is way different now. Tanizaki he appears older, he's weary, he's tired, he has a full beard, and basically time has passed differently. Like, he even looks at them and he's like, you look the same as when I last saw you. How is this possible? And Kirie asks, hey, have you seen my dad? He's a potterer. And Tanizaki says, well, there's rumors of a potterer at the dragonfly pond. Maybe it's him. So Kirie and her group decide to continue down the labyrinth, try to see if they can find her dad. So it becomes night, take a rest for a while. Shuichi once again talks about the town and how it was originally a spiral. But what started this? Why was the town a spiral and no one else figured that out? And he theorizes that maybe what happened is that the town was originally a spiral. Something happened to like destroy some of the houses, and so the spiral was destroyed, and all the people who could share about the spiral had their memories wiped out, or they were killed, or they just disappeared. So basically this town started off as a spiral, then the spiral went away. Whoever was there originally when the town was originally a spiral is gone, and no one knows about the town and the spiral origins. This is just a theory that he has. But they wake up the next day, continue on their trek. Chie is starting to get tired. Shuichi notices that there's smoke up in the sky, that someone is being cremated. And the spiral and the smoke spiral in the sky is going into the dragonfly pond, like it did in the first episode. So then he theorizes, well, let's follow the smoke. We can tell where the middle of the spiral is by seeing where the smoke is going, because the smoke is going into the dragonfly pond, which is in the middle of the spiral. So they keep going through the row houses. Eventually they come across like debris that's kind of like blocking them from continuing, but there's a way through the row house. So basically they start going through the row house, and the like bodies and stuff that are inside have kind of parted like the Red Sea and allowed them to go through. But as Kirie is about to exit, the creatures inside basically rebuild the wall. They complete the wall, and so Kirie is trapped inside, and we never see her again. And her fate is left unknown. In the manga, she gets suffocated by the bodies. So the bodies that are inside the row house, they basically suffocate her, and she dies. But here, her fate is kind of left unknown because we don't see that. We basically just see a wall get built in front of her, and she's blocked from the other side, and Kirie can't get to her. But eventually they start hearing, like, we've completed the circle, we're done. And they basically assume that, oh, okay, looks like they've completed the row house. The spiral row house is done, no more building. They see like weird smoke and stuff and like a weird noise, and they open up one of the row house doors, and it's empty. All the people that were inside are gone. It's just now an empty town filled with a spiral row house. And so eventually they just keep going, and they find the center. And now the pond is gone. And instead of the pond, it's just a spiral staircase leading towards something in the abyss, but they can't see the bottom. Kirie is like, well, I think my dad's somewhere down there. I'm going to go look for him. And Shuichi stops her for a moment, and he says, I'm going to go with you. And so the two walk down the staircase hand in hand, until eventually they come across one of the townspeople. He's just nothing but like a weird spiral body just laying on the floor, and he begs the two to take him with them. He wants to see what's in the center of the spiral. He wants to see what's down below. But they don't want to do that because they kind of want to find Kirie's parents and get the hell out of there, and this guy's going to slow them down. But this guy's like out of his mind. He starts attacking Kirie. He like bites at her leg, and Shuichi tries to pull him off, and eventually the guy wraps around Shuichi and pulls him off the spiral staircase, and the two fly down into the abyss and disappear. So Kirie starts making her way down the staircase, and eventually the staircase ends, but the bottom keeps going. In fact, when she looks, like, she can't see anything except like this weird spiral tower. The bottom can't be seen. And so she tries to climb down, and she falls, and she grabs part of the spiral tower, but eventually she gets blown off, and she just falls through the abyss. And it's not really shown here, but basically in the manga, one of the twisters like has grabbed her and brought her down to the floor, so that's how she's able to safely land at the bottom of the abyss. But once she reaches the bottom, he sees all the townsfolk, all the people that were inside the row house. They are all dead. They've all turned to stone. They're all just tangled up into each other. Eventually she looks up and she sees something straight out of Lovecraft, straight out of the Cthulhu mythos. Just basically it's a ruin. It's a giant building with a bunch of spiral pillars and spiral ornaments and decorations, and there's a blinding light that flashes every once in a while, and the light is coming from these spiral towers. Kirie also notices that all the bodies that have turned to stone, they're all staring at this ruin, at this giant monolith, at this whatever it is. And so she makes her way towards it, and as she approaches, she sees her parents. Her parents are dead. They're tangled up together, and they've been turned into stone. And then that's when she hears a voice calling out towards her. She turns and she sees Shuichi laying on the floor. And she goes to Shuichi, and Shuichi says that, it was this all along. This was the truth behind the curse. This building, this monolith, this whatever, this like ancient alien architecture. Like, whatever ancient beings created this architecture, these ruins are now just acting on pure instinct, luring in the unsuspecting living above as it hungers with each century. Where he's coming up with all this, I have no idea. He's just theorizing, I guess. Or maybe this monolith is giving him some kind of information telepathically or something. But yeah, basically the truth of the town, according to Shuichi, is that these ancient beings, possibly centuries ago, We have no idea what they are. They could be eldritch horrors, they could be aliens, they could be gods. They created this weird spiral monolith, and those beings disappeared. And now the ruins are basically just acting on instinct. They're just doing what they were built to do, and that's luring in unsuspecting people from above. And they've just grown stronger and stronger with each century. And he basically tells Kirie, like, I'm hurt, so I'm not going to be able to leave. Get out of here, while you still have the chance. And Kirie is like, no, I'm tired. Like, I'm tired of running. I just want to be with you. And so they embrace, and they hold hands, and their arms start elongating and spiraling together, and they basically end up just wrapped up in each other's arms. As we pull back and we see the town, we just see the giant spiral staircase. And then we hit the credits, and there's actually a post-credit scene. And the post-credit scene is basically a callback to the first episode, to the very beginning. Only instead of Shuuichi arriving at the town to meet with his girlfriend, we instead have this woman, this young teenage girl, arriving at the town to meet with her boyfriend. And as the two are walking together, she basically says, hey, have you ever thought about running away together? Have you ever thought about leaving this town? And her boyfriend's kind of wondering why. And she points out the spirals, and we see the whirlpools and stuff like that. It's basically a callback to the very opening scene of this series. And that's it. That's Uzumaki. So I will say that this episode was way, way better than episode 2 and 3. I think a lot of that has to do with the pacing. And I think a lot of that was because the pacing in the manga stopped becoming an anthology and actually started connecting together. So because of that, this episode flowed a lot better. We didn't just have random moments happening out of nowhere. And the animation seems to have even gotten a little bit better. Don't get me wrong, there are some terrible moments here. There's a moment where Shuichi falls down the pit, the spiral pit. That looks really, really bad. Basically, they just took like a PNG and then they just had it fall. There was like no animation into it whatsoever. And there were other moments when people got pulled up into the tornadoes. Sometimes they looked really bad. But then we had other moments that actually looked pretty good. There were moments that it almost seemed like they were doing the rotoscope like they did in the first episode. Those moments were very, very brief, like only like a couple of seconds. But I did notice them. And even like the ending scene, the post-credit scene, seemed to be a little bit better animated. I wonder if it was like left over from the first studio, or if maybe they just copied the same exact model. They just basically rotoscoped the same model that was rotoscoped in the first episode, and then they just flipped the genders. That could have been the case. But I will say that the animation was better than episode 2 and 3. Nowhere close to episode 1 though. So while it was an improvement, it was nowhere near what episode 1 brought to the table. So did it stick the landing? I would say yeah. I think it did. I think it did a really good job of adapting the last 6 chapters. And because it followed the last 6 chapters, like beat by beat, the flow of the story is just so much better. It's not like as chaotic as episode 2 and 3. And I know there were some theories out there. I think someone that worked on this said that the random moments that happened in episode 2 and 3 were done on purpose because they wanted it to be crazy and frantic, like you were spiraling down. I think that's just an excuse because those frantic moments don't happen in this episode. Episode 1 was amazingly paced. Episode 4 was done really well when it came to the pacing. Episode 2 and 3 were not. They were just random, wacky, just completely butchering the series. So, in my opinion, I think episode 1 and episode 4 were the best. I would say if I were to rank them, it would go episode 1, then 4, then 2, and then 3. Yeah, I think it nailed the ending. It's just unfortunate that the middle of this series is pretty terrible. Like episode 2, I enjoyed it, but like if I'm looking back on it, it's not the greatest. It wasn't all that great. Like I still found it entertaining, but you can notice that it was heading in the wrong direction. And then episode 3 just took it further, and just episode 3 was bad. It was just terrible. But episode 4, I felt like it turned it around. I would say that Uzumaki Spiral into Horror is half of a good series. I really enjoyed episode 1 and I enjoyed episode 4. I found episode 2 to be really flawed but entertaining, and episode 3 was just downright terrible. And I know some of you might disagree. Some of you might be like, oh, the only good episode was episode 1. And I can completely understand that. I mean, episode 1 was basically perfect. It was the perfect episode. Great sound, great characters, great pacing, great visuals. Like, the animation was just beautiful. And episode 2 and 3 were nowhere close to that. But I think episode 4 did a pretty decent job of turning it around. Don't get me wrong, it is nowhere near the quality of episode 1. Episode 1 is like a perfect 10, basically. I'd give episode 4 an 8. And episode 2, it's flawed, but I liked it. I'll give it like a 5. And episode 3 is just like a 2 or a 3. It was bad. Yeah, maybe you'll disagree with that, but I think that episode 4 did a really decent job of turning things around and sticking the landing. Again, nowhere near the quality of episode 1, but I wasn't expecting that. Yeah, there you go. There's Uzumaki Spiral into Horror. Kind of a shame that the previous 2 episodes kind of ruined this series. Because like I said, episode 1 was fantastic. It started fantastic. It ended fantastic. It just took a dump in the middle, though. So, that kind of sucks. But with that said, I'm glad it ended the way it did. I thought, at least it ends on a good note. So, yeah. Did Uzumaki stick the landing? I would say yes. So, there you go. There's Uzumaki, Spiral into Horror, episode 4, the finale. I liked the finale. With that said, please go read the manga. If you liked the anime, or if you liked parts of it, and you thought other parts were kind of weak or not as great, trust me when I say that the manga does a way better job. If you enjoy this even just a slight bit, please go read the manga. It's so good. It's basically Junji Ito's magnum opus. It's the thing he's most known for, and for a good reason. It's a really good series. So please read the manga, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you next time. Take care. Later. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, I still want to thank you for watching it this far, and I hope the next one is more to your liking. With that said, thank you once again, and I hope you guys and gals have a good one. Later.